Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Roundtable Show. This is episode 493. You can normally join us live on Facebook, but unfortunately this week Facebook wasn't very cooperative. But obviously you're listening to this, but you normally can join us and watch this live on the WP-Tonic Facebook panel. We've got a lively panel. I've got some good stories. I think it's going to be an excellent show. I'm going to let the panel quickly let themselves introduce themselves, starting with Chris. Chris, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. I'm Chris from LifterLMS, and I help course creators create, launch, and scale. You can find me at lifterlms.com, and I have a podcast for course creators called LMScast.
That's great. And got my friend Sally. Sally, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Sally Getch. I'm the WP fangirl and organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland, California, or on Zoom at the moment. And I actually had a client call this week with somebody who heard me on this podcast and thought I sounded smart. And I'm not sure which one was more surprising.
I don't know what does that say about the rest of us. Oh, there we go. I got my co-host. I got my co-host on my first interview show, Adrian.
Hi everyone, my name's Adrian. I help small businesses launch their digital marketing strategy with our product Groundhog.
And I got Stephen. Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Stephen Souter. With Zipfish.io, we make WordPress blazing fast.
And I've got my friend Spencer. Spencer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, Spencer Foreman from LaunchFlows.com.
Right. And before we go into the main stories, I want to talk about our sponsors. And our main sponsor is Kinsta. And what Kinsta is specialized WordPress hosting. I've been with them for the past couple of years. Really fantastic hosting, fast, reliable, reasonably priced. If you're looking to set up a learning management system or WooCommerce, they're one of the companies that you should straight away look at. Really customized interface, really easy to use, all the bells and whistles, one-click backup. You can choose whatever version of PHP you want in the interface. Numerous little things like that make your life as a client or you're working for a client really easy. And if you go over to them, look at one of their packages, choose it, and the main thing is tell them that you found out about them on the WP-Tonic show. And our other sponsor is a really interesting product plugin, and it's called LaunchFlows. Now, LaunchFlows customize your WooCommerce checkout experience with Elementor. And what that basically means is you don't need code. You can really produce modern day funnels using your normal WordPress tools. And you can amaze yourself and your clients. And you can also do this not only for WooCommerce checkouts, but you can build any type of funnel using LaunchFlows. It is quite amazing. So go over there and have a look at it. And they've offered a code as well. It's WP-Tonic Rocks. Repeat that, WP-Tonic Rocks. And you get 25% off the plugin. It's really, really amazing plugin, and I strongly advise you to go over and learn more about it. So let's go into the first stories. And this comes from WP Engine announcing Genesis Pro and the future of Genesis. What did you think of this one, Sally?
Well, I thought that it was a little irritating that I saw this in my feed before they posted it in the Genesis Slack channel. Although it was more or less simultaneously. I think I happened to look at the news feed first. The Genesis Pro thing, I'm having a little trouble wrapping my head around the way they're rolling it out as part of the hosting, because what it seems like is a really good tool for developers to, and it does what we've seen some other things do, including like providing a lot of existing block collections and making it easy to save block patterns and to customize things, and also to decide who has access to changing and editing certain kinds of blocks. And I know you can do this to some degree with Elementor and Beaver Builder and other page builders is kind of like choose what your clients can mess with. Which is all, interesting and potentially useful, but they're rolling it out as basically add an extra $30 a month to your hosting plan. And you can use this on all of your sites. And I'm like, well, all of what sites? Because, most people don't actually want to like create elaborate new landing pages constantly. And lots of people only have one website. It seems like it's more aimed at people who build websites. And if it's attached to your hosting, wouldn't that mean your clients all had to get it themselves? I'm not sure about this. So I'm trying to wrap my head around it. They're trying to explain it to me. Much more interesting in the announcement was what they're talking about with Genesis X and kind of the next phase of the theme framework and moving into the block-based themes and compatibility with the full site editing and that kind of thing. And it'll be a while before we see that. And, on the one hand, it's, oh Lord, and I just, learned how to do, the new stuff for Gutenberg in the editor. Now there's going to be a dramatic change to the way everything is structured. But the thing is, there's going to be that dramatic change to the way everything is structured in WordPress anyway. And as I said, when I put this in our Slack, it seems like they're thinking along much the same lines that Spencer has talked about on this show many times about, your theme is just going to be basically a place to put your blocks or your page builder layout or whatever it is.
Yeah. What did you think of it, Spencer? And it's $30 extra.
I don't have a dog in my house, but I'm hearing barking going on from one of my teenagers. I understand why they're doing
They're
that.
that upset at being stuck at home, eh?
It's like having a terrier living in the house. The thing that I see happening with this is that it's a natural progression of an asset that has, I'm not going to say outlived its purpose, but become redundant. So for example, the method that Genesis, I think, perfected was the original spinoff of what Chris Pearson started with Thesis, which was taking blocks of PHP functions and using hooks and filters to build your thing, your WordPress site, which for, all of us geeky geeks, that was really fast in a world where everything else was really slow. But you flash forward some 16 years later, and now you've got page builder blocks or Elementor blocks, which you can very quickly take a function and put it into a block without the need for Genesis, and then just drag it all over the place. So it kind of feels a little bit like, let's take our wooden wagon wheel and figure out a way to retrofit it onto our Tesla just because we have the wooden wagon wheel. And I don't know, maybe they've got some surprises, but from what I've read, there's nothing that's new or dramatically different about what you can do with the core stuff. It's just taking the wagon wheel, putting it into, a new box so you can move it around. The thing that would be interesting to me would be if they went maybe with this Genesis X into a different territory. So for example, one of the areas that I think is very fascinating, we've talked about before, is the entry and exit point using a different technology. So if they worked with one of the JavaScript frameworks that allowed you to do some whiz-bang stuff, or even cooler, on the entry side of things, if they came up with some kind of cool interface that allowed you to add your data, manipulate your data, have a CRM-like experience on the back end, that would be cool. But I'm not so excited about, let's find another way to use what already works in a different format. It feels like PayPal, where you go there and it's like, oh, I see, it's the same 1997 PayPal, but now you're trying to move everything around and make it look like it's new.
There you go.
No, and at least in 1997, PayPal didn't try to do infinite scroll on your activity page.
Or you have to search 45 places for the thing that used to be right on the front page, right?
There you go. We reckon, Chris.
I'm really excited about it. The author, David Vogelpohl, I was actually listening to his podcast this morning, which is called Press This. It's a great podcast for the WordPress community. And I've heard David talk on several occasions about what he calls the most annoying problem on the internet, or in WordPress, I guess, which is like a user stepping up to WordPress and that first like starting experience, kind of that blank screen. Like it doesn't look like the demo we saw on whatever plugin or theme site or whatever. It's like there's just a lot to be done. And if you're not a WordPress power user, there's a lot of friction there. So the idea of having some like pre-done block libraries, I think, is really interesting. And I know Genesis is older, thing, but I think it does have an opportunity to kind of leapfrog page builders and really drive the innovation forward on the block scene and just innovate there. And there are other, companies innovating on blocks and whatnot, but I'm pretty interested to just see where it goes.
All right. What about you, Stephen?
I think it's always interesting to watch how older plugins and stuff try to adapt to this new block world. And it's always exciting to see kind of what approach are they taking, like taking like a pre-built approach, right? Like here's your pre-style template stuff, or they're going to take more of a developer-friendly approach where it's like build blocks faster using our tools. I was a little bit surprised that Genesis seems to be heading in this like pre-built block, because for me, I always thought of Genesis more as a developer tool to get in and build a theme really fast, really quickly, based on this foundation of Genesis.
Right.
But
well, I think that's what the Genesis X part is more aimed at like being able to create custom blocks and build templates based on blocks without writing code in the way that you used to.
It seems strange to me that their first like real push into blocks is not developer focused. I would have thought that they would have tried to continue the narrative. Like this is the theme for developers who want to build blocks. Like this is your,
it makes sense because WP Engine's audience isn't developers, right? That's not who their audience is. Their audience is kind of a little bit lower on the totem pole in terms of technical know-how. So, and since kind of Genesis is now a product line essentially in order to differentiate themselves from other hosting companies, it makes sense that they'd want to kind of use that product line in order to make their customers' onboarding experience just a little bit easier.
Right. And it ties in with the purchase of Block Labs and the purchase of Atomic Blocks. And so that you get a combination of the theme as the container for the blocks where, you've got some styling to match those blocks. And you've got a way to import, all of the newer themes are set up so that if you want to, you can, import the sample content, which has a homepage built out of blocks and so on, and get that instantaneous. It looks like the demo experience.
What's happening here is WP Engine is scratching their own itch with the problem with what you mentioned, Stephen, which is the blank slate. And you log into WordPress now with WP Engine, right? And it's like, all right, well, now what? And then, well, we have a product line. Look, you can just pay an extra however many dollars a month, and you can just kind of import the theme and the blocks, and it's just all ready to go. So that's what this is about. It's about making their customers' onboarding experience easier.
Yes, the extra charge was the weird thing to me, because it seemed like if you were saying this is going to be part of your hosting package, and maybe it's only part of the, slightly more expensive hosting package, and that's, because Spence is always saying, what's your differentiator in hosting? And that's one of the differentiators. That makes sense to me. What doesn't so much make sense to me is you can have this if you pay us, quite a bit extra, more than it would cost you for a plugin that had a similar kind of feature.
I suppose they're banking on what your time's worth.
I have a prediction that I think where all this block madness is going, which would really make more sense, is if somebody could become the aggregator of the blocks that are really worth their salt, so that instead of me having to pay the pro, even if it's $29 or $39 or $49 a year for each of 5 different block makers, if there was a place that I could, for $5 a year, get this block and $5 get that.
I wish people would build individual blocks because I often have several block libraries installed just because I really like the media card block in Co blocks, and I really like the food and drink block in Co blocks. But, I prefer the accordion block and the row layout block from Cadence. and this kind of thing, that I understand why people put them out in groups. They had an example already in front of them in the people who make the extensions for Elementor and Beaver Builder, and it's like, here, get 25,000 different tools for Beaver Builder, and like go nuts tinkering with them all day to see what they are, instead of, here, this is the most effective block that does X. This is the most effective block that does Y, and you can select, I want a la carte blocks, damn it. Is it that hard to provide?
Like, think about it. Everybody has their individual motive, but think about it in terms of the blocks, because of the Gutenberg standard, are being built the same way. Now, again, knowing a tiny bit about coding and stuff, I realize that the individual block authors may have a little of their own secret sauce in each of them. But if there was an aggregate marketplace, maybe, hey, I got an idea, sponsored by that company Automatic, that allowed people to just get full retail value for their $5 block, I would be incentivized, and I would think the other people would be incentivized on both sides of the table. As a buyer, I would gladly pay $5 for the one form block that I really needed, instead of having to buy the 52 other things and loading up my dashboard, first of all, number one. Number two, creating the same problem we're going to talk about in the third or fourth story, which is now I've got 4 or 5 or 6 accessory block makers that all have put all of their crap into my website just because I wanted 4 or 5 blocks. And it seems to me that we're missing an opportunity, like saying there's no more like grocery stores that sell 1 pack of gum. Everything is now Costco. You can only buy things in a bulk pack, and it just seems like we're missing.
Well, that's when monetary interests clash with user experience and satisfaction, because there's no money in selling one-off $5 blocks.
There would hold on. I agree with you.
There would be if the way Spencer's envisioning
it. If in the dashboard,
there's money for the big players who can afford to upfront the capital in order to build that system. But for one-off developers, there's no money in it.
Hold on.
There's money in selling a $149 product that renews annually.
Hold on. I'm saying if you had 1 block or 2 blocks and you got, let's say, $5, if Automatic would loosen up their purse strings and just pass through after the stripe charge or whatever, the full amount to the developer, that audience is tens of millions of people. You could make a living selling $5 blocks that were popular if you had 1.
Right. I mean, I think what Spencer is saying is somebody like Automatic should create the marketplace. And then for the block developers, it could be worthwhile because there's a big audience there, and they could sell if you just break up your library. And then you're going to get 5,000
form blocks, right? Like,
but at least
that doesn't make any sense, because every developer is going to be like, I want my $5 block in there.
There's already 5,000.
There's worse than 5,000.
And they're differentiated into plugin developers, little packs of blocks that they can choose and actually make a profit or a decent living off of. I don't see.
Well, yeah, but
there's no money in that.
I'm talking about free blocks, for God's sake.
I'm saying the people.
So there's no money in it anyway, unless they can upsell you on something.
I think we're in this conversation at this point, and we'll move on to story 2, and that's 28,000 GoDaddy hosting accounts were compromised, and this comes from WordFence, which provides a very popular security plugin in the WordPress ecosystem. And also there was a couple other stories that Elementor got hacked, and I think one of Astra Themes plugins, very popular plugins, got hacked also. But I think when a hosting company gets hacked, it's slightly even higher than a really popular plugin. So what did you reckon about this one, Stephen? Was you surprised when this came on the radar?
Yeah, I think that's like a hosting company's worst nightmare, right? SSH keys getting out in the public. Like, that's unfeathered access. Or I guess it kind of depends on how they have their hosting set up. But the one nice thing that you have as a hosting company, whereas if you're like a plugin developer like Elementor, you can release a patch, but then you have to wait for everybody to update it. And you're going to get sites being compromised until everybody has updated it. If you have the servers and you have the credentials, you can instantly lock everybody down, right? You can get rid of the SSH keys from everybody's server. You can refresh them, so everybody has to create new keys. So I think it's an interesting like just because Elementor just got, had a security hole in it, kind of looking at the two different companies and being in two different worlds, your response to that is somewhat different. And how much control you have over your own platform is somewhat different. But it is, I think, worse to have SSH keys get released than, the ability for somebody to compromise a single site.
Which accounts on GoDaddy actually used SSH? I didn't realize they did that.
Yeah, I think it's probably more your, at least from what I know of GoDaddy, like your more pro level stuff. So if like you have an entire server, right, that you've purchased versus just like a site on a server, like you probably, and you're more of a developer level, like you would have uploaded SSH keys to get in and out of that server pretty easy via the command line. So I mean, if somebody can take over an entire server, like not just a website or a database, like you can do all sorts of great things. Or not great things, if you will.
I love the way you say
it's all a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
So where you reckon, Spencer? GoDaddy, 28,000. Looks like, and they were kind of semi-pro accounts.
Yeah. I mean, I always say GoDaddy is the place to go to get your domain name because of their system is a gauntlet of sales and marketing when you check out. But once you're like prepared to very carefully get through that, the domain name hosting is undeniably the best way to go because it's so immediate. But as far as hosting goes, I mean, yeah, you kind of get what you pay for there. And I'm not really sure what happened here, but it doesn't surprise me that since they have such a large volume business of people that aren't really tech savvy to see what's going on. And to be fair about it, whatever was going on, it's not really that dissimilar from all the other stuff. I mean, this has nothing to do with the Elementor thing, but like we just know about the Elementor and the add-ons for Elementor. I mean, getting hacked is a cat and mouse game, so it's just going to constantly happen.
And as I said about Elementor, anything that's popular gets attacked because you want to reach a lot of people, and GoDaddy has a lot of customers. So, they may be more of a target than a company that doesn't have as many customers. And it's, you can't tell just from the fact that they were hacked whether their setup was more or less secure than other people's.
We interviewed Chris Lemmer yesterday, and he's coming on the show to debate with you, Spencer, about hosting.
That will be fun.
Hosting becoming a commodity in the next couple of weeks.
His camera. He's got a really nice webcam or something. It's got
it's got like the faded background and everything.
No, he's using which I'm going to be using next week. Actually, I bought one.
A 35mm camera. What's he using?
I bought a Canon 50. Actually, he's probably using a Canon.
Right. He's got like real depth of field. Like it's got like a huge.
This is like a big head though, isn't it? But the one thing that he said that was really interesting, and I thought the opposite. He said that the hosting market is, even with big players like GoDaddy, is dominated by thousands of small players. And I had the totally opposite. That it was dominated by Bluehost and EG.
EIG from good friends.
From my agency experience, whenever we brought on a new client, rarely were they hosted with any of the known players. It was always my brother's friends, uncles, garage owners, hosting company. And I thought, these people are just coming out of the woodwork. Like, so just
that's
from,
right.
Just from anecdotal experience,
I have a friend who's hosting it on the
hosters
computer in his office.
So it's not unheard of, right? Like I think maybe 10% of the clients that ever came in through our doors, which over the 6 years, probably somewhere around 100, maybe 10 of them were hosted on SiteGround or GoDaddy or
amazing. I just didn't realize that people, it was like that. So I learned something yesterday. Well,
I think a lot of people get into like the whole WordPress world from like referrals from friends, right? They're like, hey, how'd you build your site? And when you start getting referrals from people, like they're like, oh, use this hosting provider, use that hosting provider. And you end up with this like kind of fragmented thing because everybody's recommending however they stumbled into it, which was how the last guy stumbled into it. And so when you're like looking, especially probably Adrian's case, right, with an agency, like people who are looking to level up that next level, right, hire somebody to start doing stuff. you are in this very fragmented world, right? You're getting people from all over the place with all different types of stacks on top, and a bunch of different servers and things like that.
And it's a bit like the last point, like on my service, we've now got with Lifter, we install a theme that we developed internally for Lifter, and it's all laid out. And they say, well, we don't like that homepage layout. I said, well, you got Elementor, get at it. You start hacking away at your heart's content. We're just giving you a layout, so you haven't got that blank canvas at the start of it. So I think we're going to go for a break, and when we come back, we've got some more stories, listeners and viewers. We'll be back in a few moments. Coming back, well, we've had a spirited discussion so far. Chris has been a little bit quiet. I think he's just chilling out on Friday. You've had a busy week, haven't you, Chris, haven't you?
It has been a little busy.
Yes. He's got some crazy groups on his... He's got some crazy... I just join your groups, Chris, just for the sport content. Right. On to story 3. ACF blocks provide assortment of blocks built from Advanced Custom Fields Pro. Oh, God. Who to start with? Let's start Adrian. What do you reckon of this one?
Which one are we looking at? ACF?
Number 3, yeah.
Skip me.
Right. All right. Well, Stephen. Go on, Steve. What do you reckon? Got any views about this one?
ACF is awesome, and it's really interesting to watch people build stuff on top of it. Just because you automatically out of the box get a lot of flexibility. What I think is interesting about ACF and blocks is like Gutenberg blocks and trying to make those two things work together is they kind of, I don't know, it feels like they're a little bit at odds with each other as far as when you get to the database and how they're choosing to store data. Like you can make them work, but like from a fundamental perspective, right, blocks is trying to store all this code with these comments around it, right, so they can pull it back out and render the blocks, which is advantageous when you're looking at like site speed stuff or pulling things and storing things really efficiently. Not as advantageous when you're looking for searching, right? If you're trying to do like a complex WordPress query to find all these data points to mash up your posts. And what's intriguing to me is people that are trying to mash these two together, and it'll be really interesting to see where it lands, because I feel as blocks keep getting built out, either blocks is going to get better at adopting like ACF type integrations where we're storing things in custom database fields for actual posts, or it's going to kind of get more divorced from that, and things are going to kind of become harder and harder for ACF to be integrated.
Yes. Okay. Here is the thing that people don't expect when they build ACF blocks, which I've done quite a few of. Normally, advanced custom fields, it creates custom fields. They live in your post meta database, and that is, good and bad. ACF blocks, like everything else, are stored in the content. The data gets stored, not as a separate custom field, but as part of a block in the post content field.
But you still have the post meta, right? Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but like what's happening is you get two places where this information is stored, right? You're in the content and in the post meta.
It's just in the content, like the rest of the Gutenberg
really?
stuff.
Okay. I didn't realize that. That's very interesting.
It is. And, it's like, well, it's like the good news is the bad news there. Because often people, at least, I had certainly used ACF to build things where, to kind of create something that would make a page layout of a sort. And so the information that was in those custom fields really was meant to be part of the content. But there are other times when you actually want this stuff somewhere separate so that that you can retrieve it elsewhere in the site. And that's kind of like, there's this decision tree about what goes in a block and what goes in a custom post type or a custom field or something. And it has a lot to do with where am I going to display this other than the page where I'm, first creating it.
So if I was to use ACF blocks and I stored some data and then I wanted to retrieve that data, I would have to query the post content to find that.
Right.
Like,
You would have
parse through it
to,
all.
I mean, there are ways to query for specific
Right.
blocks, and is this particular block the first block in your post, and that kind of thing. But it is
just do like a
different.
post-meta
You
lookup.
wouldn't use a meta query.
Yeah. Interesting. Thanks for the education.
Oh,
That's
we've
so
got less
fascinating.
now. You've been.
I've been upstaged now.
Oh, you've been upstaged as well. Anybody else want to comment on this, or shall I go on to the next story? No, let's go on to the next story then. All right, by Amazon. What do you reckon about this one, Chris?
Well, I haven't been in the warehouse, but just in a leadership position, I think the main thing we do, whether we're managing a warehouse, managing a company, or managing a family, is about protecting our people from unrecoverable mistakes. That's the most important thing. And, the language we use, if we use a word whistleblower, that has one connotation. If we use a different word, it has a different connotation.
Concerned employee.
Yeah. So words are very powerful in journalism. So, and I'm just not close enough to this issue to really comment, but I just would say that in these times, that's the move, preventing your people from unrecoverable mistakes. So whatever needs to happen, and that's what the leaders, the managers, the HR people need to do. And if employees are scared and in fear, and they're also concerned about losing their jobs, you have to lead through this. And that's gonna, panic is contagious, so is leadership. And this is the time for companies to step up. And there's always going to be a lot of chaos the more people you put together, especially in a panic. But my just main thing about it is go slow and just make sure you don't make any call that's where you're going to put people in a situation where a mistake could be made that is unrecoverable. It's one thing to let a kid fall down on a bike and learn, get up and go again. It's another to let them bike off a cliff. So it's just a leadership thing. I don't know enough about the details to comment on the specifics, though.
Right. So, Adrian, you want to comment on this one?
I'm just going to repeat what Chris said. The one thing I found interesting was that the author of the article was forced to make a decision on whether to sign off on something that would cause employees of his to basically not sort of get any sort of recompensation or justice for their concerns. And instead of kind of like acquiescing and saying, okay, Amazon top press gets the decision here and signing off, he chose to just bow out because it was against his conscience. Whether or not that's I always find it's easier to create change from within than from without. So maybe there was an alternative road or path to be taken here. But if you're ever in a situation where, you're almost being forced to do something against your conscience, even though and if you leave, you're not going to have the same level of impact on the situation as you would staying in. I would reconsider staying in, because it's always easier to create change on a certain situation that you care about and that you're passionate about from within an organization than it is to affect that change from without an organization.
I think it might depend on whether you've tried to change things, or whether you go in with that with that belief and find that what's actually happened a little while down the line is that you've just been kind of contributing to making the problem worse, because you can't get anywhere.
It's risky.
Well, Spencer, do you want to comment on this? But you had a fair bit to say last week, or should I go on to the next story?
Well, I mean, the only thing I can add to this is that while the specific details aren't known, and certainly any company is entitled to act the way they do, I find that there's a good comparison between the published management style and response of the workers to Costco versus, let's say, some company like an Amazon. Because while I appreciate and really love the thing that Amazon does, I do find it harder and harder to reconcile how they continue to grow and profit by making full use of all the leverage they have, from taxes to exploiting workers to, like we talked about, let somebody build a business. Then once we discover what it is, we'll just step right in and take over with our own brand name. I find it really hard. Like, what is wrong with the ethical orientation of the C-suite?
It wouldn't have cost them that much more, would it? Really?
But you know what I'm saying? In other words, what I'm saying is, Costco, the two
I think the problem is what Morton used to bring up. There isn't actually an ethical orientation.
But that's what I'm saying. Look at two companies that are not exactly parallel, but pretty close. Costco is in the same, team level of Amazon. Costco has made it their foundational roots to be moral and ethical and treat their employees first, especially the workers. And we never hear anything but praise, even to the extent like recently I saw one of the shoppers at Costco was complaining about having to wear a face mask, and Costco was like, boo-hoo for you. Everybody else is more important to protect than you individually. And so I find it really troublesome that with all this bad publicity and everything, that somebody from Jeff Bezos down to the rest of the C-suite doesn't at least acknowledge, like, what would be the cost of us acting right here? Like, of just doing what we're going to lose, like 1/10 of 1% of profit. We already own the whole thing. So that's the part that, to me, like, Walmart had that issue and still does have that issue. Like, they've been hiding.
That's right. Welcome to the company. Here is your application for.
Is that what's wrong with corporate America in general? Is that we have basically like Aaron Brockovich movies going on everywhere? There's like a good guy company and a super villain company, and that's the only two choices? I don't know.
I think, especially in Silicon Valley, what I've observed, and I'm not sure if it's going to penetrate a lot of corporate America, but especially Silicon Valley, this libertarian, and what was her name? Anne Reich, was it?
Ayn Rand.
Well, yeah, Ayn Rand. She was a spaced out girl. I had the misfortune of reading one of her books. It was freaking painful. It was say the least.
I think you read Judy Blume. I think that's
yeah.
That. Yeah, I didn't get very far into Atlas Shrugged. I have to say.
Oh, God Almighty! But they're really bought into, and they've sprinkled it with real poison, which is a kind of modern day eugenics about the fittest get to the top and the rest just fall, and they've combined.
It's a complete obliviousness to privilege.
Well, and I was talking to John about this yesterday, and I said, yes, it's that as well. But what it's really about, it's denying luck. As human beings, we don't like the idea. Yes, you need the skills, you need the mental attitude, you need to be in the right place at the right time, but you always need luck, and we don't like.
Well, privilege is frequently a matter of luck, right? I happened to be born white in middle America, and like I had nothing to do with that, but it gave me access to a bunch of things that I wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And people go around, blathering all about the individual responsibility, blah, 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 in complete, like, oblivion to the fact that, they're in a position to talk about those things because of a whole lot of stuff that is no credit to them whatsoever.
Right, let's go on to the next story. It's bullshit. Inside the world of the get-rich-quick world of drop shipping. I did like this one. What do you reckon this one? Oh, go on, Adrian. Go on.
Drop shipping adds virtually zero value to the consumer, and it's an unsustainable business model that is used for entrepreneurs to teach people how to be entrepreneurs. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy of certain types of entrepreneurs out there who then go on to train people how to do drop shipping, and then those people fail at drop shipping, but you know what they can do? Teach other people how to do drop shipping.
We've seen this in other areas before.
And that's basically the kind of people that do shopping. And you know what? I have several friends who attempted to do drop shipping, who attempted to start a drop shipping business last summer, and they asked for my marketing help. And I'm like, if you want marketing help, look at Amazon, because that's your competition if you're entering the drop shipping space, because Amazon is the ultimate drop shipper, right? They'll ship you a product from anywhere in the world in like 3 days or less, right? And if that's your competition, it takes you like 30 days to fulfill on a product because it's coming from China. what value are you actually bringing to the table for the consumer besides the fact that your ad reached them first? If you're looking to start a business that brings more value to the customer long term than simply, ordering 30,000 of a product and then, running out of the product, like, all right, great, what's the next thing I'm going to sell? What's the next thing I'm going to sell? What's the next thing? Because that's a never ending process. And, fads change and trends change and all of those things. And it's just, dropshipping is not a long-term value-based business. And what you're going to get at the end of your term is you're going to basically break even, or you're going to lose money on all of the marketing that you spent, the Shopify charges and whatever. Because at the end of the day, Amazon's got just all that business. And the person who also got the rest of your money is the person who trained you on how to do the drop shipping, whatever drop shipping course that you paid for.
I think
those are my thoughts on drop shipping.
It's an MLM.
The two keys to knowing if any industry is BS is, are there videos with Lamborghinis in the background? And are you seeing ads for courses on how to do it every other ad on Facebook? That's how you know, complete garbage.
Give up. Get rich quick is bullshit. However you're trying to do it, it ain't going to happen. Go and find a way to get rich slow.
Chris,
not get rich slow, but get rich while providing value. That's the big thing, because there's inherently zero value in a drop shipping business because you can't sell it. You can't really do anything with it. The only thing it's good for is being a middleman in between the consumer and the person who's actually producing the product.
Yeah, well, I can see where you're coming from, but sometimes being the middleman, some middlemen have become some of the richest people in America.
Right.
I can point that out to you, Adrian.
Yeah, but in context though, right? If we're looking at the vast majority of the people who run drop shipping sites, they offer no additional value. If you're looking at
I
Amazon,
was thinking, when was
this
written? Because I'm pretty sure they're not all sitting barefoot together in a cafe right now.
If you look at Amazon, that's also a middleman. They provide value in less than 3-day shipping, and they have AWS, and they have all of these other things and whatnot. But if you're just looking at your Joe Blow drop shipper, they get the product to you, but it takes forever. The markup is insane. And just the list goes on of, why wouldn't I just go buy this on Amazon, right? If your only comparison is the fact that your ad got to them first, there's no value in that.
Right. Chris, would you like to come in?
Sure. I think we have to be careful to talk in absolutes about an industry. A couple of years ago, I saw a testimonial for Lifted LMS came through, or actually a review on the WordPress repository. A woman named Sarah said, "Hey, thanks for Lifted LMS. It's awesome. I made $300K in 10 months." That got my attention.
I bet it did.
And I interviewed Sarah, and she was teaching drop shipping, and she was legitimately getting good results for her students. And you can look at her on her site. It's under the examples deal. But I've followed this for a long time. One of the first drop ship courses was by a guy named Anton Crowley called Dropship Lifestyle. And there's this whole Chiang Mai, Thailand, digital nomad thing. If you want to go way back, you can go back to Rob Potts's book called Vagabonding, or you can go to, a round two with Tim Ferriss and, Leonardo DiCaprio in the movie The Beach. And there's this wave of, this is when this entered the mainstream mind. Well, still kind of fringe, but it became a thing. You got to get your online business and your info product or your agency going. Drop shipping, I think there is a choice, like you're talking about, Jonathan, about a middleman, what I call an efficiency gap business. So if you can market and sell and do Facebook ads and Shopify better than somebody who's really good at making mattresses, sure. Eventually Amazon's going to eat your lunch. I would prefer, if I was going to guide somebody who wanted to develop an online business, who wanted to be location independent, who wanted to be hanging out in the villa in Bali, I would encourage them to make not a business around exploiting an efficiency or an ability that they can have this window of time to outmarket Amazon, and instead just build a true innovation that's truly unique.
I absolutely agree. That's that's where where the innovation comes from. That's the difference in between like drop shipping businesses and I think, you know, long-term
Right.
scalable,
I mean,
sustainable businesses
you know,
is the innovation aspect.
right. And if the person who wrote Chris's testimonial was doing something that, you know, actually provided value, and it's like, yeah, being a middleman can be a place where you provide value. I mean, you know, if you go to somebody like an insurance broker because they save you a lot of time in like figuring out what's the best thing to work with and to pay. And so you may have something sustainable, or maybe just you were in the game early in this window of time and, you know, you can make money then, but, you know, perhaps even by the time you're starting to tell people, hey, I did this thing and it was awesome and it made me money with maybe the most honest desire to be helpful anywhere, they don't have the kind of opportunities you did.
Yeah, part of the problem is they're training so many people to do dropshipping now. Now there's a ton of people that do dropshipping.
I think
And now it's super saturated too.
I guess kind of just like roll back a little bit of what I was saying earlier though, too, is some really large brands have been started by dropshipping. Case in point, like Dollar Shave Club, right? There was a warehouse with hundreds of thousands of razors. Someone needed to get rid of them. Dollar Shave Club was like, hey, I think I can build a brand around this. And so they essentially started as a dropshipping business. But what's interesting is kind of along the lines of what Adrian was saying too, is if you're going to sustain that and maintain it as a drop ship, you need to figure out how to build your own brand and your own following, which is interesting in this article. The one guy that seemed to be fairly successful has all these followers on Instagram and all these followers on YouTube, right? He has an audience to market his things to. He's built a brand outside of this like Facebook ad that he's posting. And I think that is really where you can differentiate yourself, right? Is with that following, with that brand that you create.
I'll qualify my absolute a little bit because Chris and Steven bring up great points. So I'll qualify my deep and resentful feelings for dropshipping. Is that they're both of them are right. But it's not enough to just deliver the product. You have to grow beyond whatever it is that you're buying off of AliExpress. See, there has to be brand, there has to be future proof, you have to future proof it, there has to be innovation, and you have to, you know, it has to become like an actual business, because it's not enough long term to just pick up products from somewhere and deliver them to the customer, because Amazon does that. But like, you know, Dollar Shave Club is a great example. That is a company that built an entire brand and has a great sales funnel. And now has their own line of products and all of these different things going for them, and subscription revenue and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the businesses, and that, you know, if you have a dropshipping business like that, that's an innovative, you know, that's innovation. That's a business plan. But, you know, if I'm buying cheapo earbuds off of AliExpress and delivering them, that's kind of where you're going to get into trouble, I think. But, you know, I'll qualify. Yeah. So that's my qualification.
Right then, let's drop that last story. Let's go for our recommendations. Have you got a recommendation, Adrian?
No, I don't. I didn't think of one.
And Chris was already run off. So
I got one.
He's got
He
one.
went to get his recommendation.
Oh, my friend Danny just published a new book. So if you're into the course creation game, It's called Teach Your Gift. It's free right now, the digital version on Amazon. He does that when he first launches a book. But if you're into courses or building a training-based membership site, Danny is one of the people as obsessed as I am about the topic, and you can definitely learn some stuff from him. So Teach Your Gift by Danny Inney.
All right, put the link. Can you put the link into the chat if there's a link to get it? And Sally, can you put I know you put it in our Slack channel.
I just put it in the chat.
Yeah. So what's your recommendation, Sally?
All right. I'm recommending an interview with Heather Menzies, the author of Fast Forward and Out of Control, which was written in 1990. And so the book is out of print, and it's hard to get the actual book. But the interview talks about stuff that is definitely still an issue, but this is the kind of the key quote about it. You know, when people control technology, the technology is empowering. The dehumanizing aspect comes when the organization of technology and its use limits and controls what people can do with it. And that this has been an issue with a lot of stuff that's, you know, affected how things are. Like, we invent a new technology and we think it's going to liberate us. because, you know, in the early creation days, it's completely open, and then it gets sort of adapted and commodified and used to, you know, kind of used to eliminate the humanity of a system. And instead, you know, it's like, oh, look, no labor-saving device has ever actually saved labor, because what happens is that, you know, now you can do, you know, you can do laundry in half the time with this machine. Well, that means we expect you to do laundry twice as often.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. Steve, got anything you want to recommend?
Image Map Pro. I think they have a WordPress plugin too, but about 2 years ago, I was working on this site that had this really complex, like 3D SVG world that you could hover on and get information, and programming that was like,
it sounds lovely,
a bear, because it had to be dynamic and stuff. And the other day I stumbled across this Image Map Pro company,
really
and I was
cool.
just like, man, if I had that 2 years ago, I could have, you know, doubled my profit on that project.
Oh, God. All right, put it into chat, will you? Spencer, have you got anything you want to recommend?
There's a free plugin in the WordPress repository called WP-Optimize, which I used for a specific problem. If you've ever installed plugins and uninstalled them, almost always they leave a legacy in the database, empty tables. And that might not seem like a big deal, but imagine if you had like a bunch of drawers and you put your loose change in the drawers. Well, like if you've got a database with tables that are empty but still there, like the database has to work really hard looking for stuff. Like, where did I put the change in all this?
Well, and often enough, they're not empty. There's a bunch of stuff lurking in your options table, or lurking in, you know, whatever these, like, you know, the one complaint about WordFence is what it does to your database.
Right. So in terms of the size and the other stuff, from a backup perspective, having an optimized database is really something people don't think about, but like even the size of your backup, right? A normal database of a healthy WordPress site might be 100, 125 megabytes, but you start to have unoptimized stuff and your database alone could be 250, 300, 400 megabytes, and that has to get backed up all the time. Anyway, this plugin was really interesting because it was it was very well written, all 5 stars, and it had almost 1 million installations, 900,000 plus. But it had like just the basic checklist items that it looks for, and it's literally just press and go, just say yes to it. So I really appreciated it. And even though they have a pro option to do backups and other stuff, there wasn't like a pitch to sell stuff, which, by the way, I
think they're owned by the same people who do Updraft.
Yeah, because the backup is Updraft. That's their primary product, which is a good product too. The one thing
the plugin existed for a while before that, and Updraft bought it.
There are a million ways to do this, but I also want to comment on the state of plugins, because with this whole Elementor thing, which again, I love Elementor. It's a fundamental part of what I do every day, but the Elementor Pro apparently revealed itself this week to have Easter egg upsells that pop up randomly. So heads up to the Elementor free. Heads up to the wise. That's the kind of douchebaggery that really starts to like break down trust with the company. You have a free plugin. You say, do you want the pro once? You say no. And then Easter eggs start popping up randomly, which is what's happening with the free version of Elementor. Do you want Elementor Pro? This would be a good time. That kind of douchebaggery is not happening in this plugin, shouldn't happen in Elementor, and is the kind of thing that when you see it, you start to go like, what other kind of shit are you doing to me? And I really don't understand who thinks that's a good idea in the world we live in. Like, who makes those choices?
Yeah. Well, I've got a recommendation, and it's go to Frank Kern's website. Frank is a really hardcore online marketer, and I periodically joined some of his courses, and I've learned a lot from Frank. He's quite blatant. He just wants to make loads of money, which I just admire him for his honesty. The only thing is, if you do join any of his courses, you are going to be bombarded by upsells, endless upsells from him. But he does have a lot of really, really interesting free content on his website. So if you want to learn something about online marketing from a true online master, go to Franken's website and you will learn something.
Each upsell is a learning opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And he does it.
before we end, I just have I thought of a recommendation. Is that okay?
Yeah, go on.
So 2 weeks ago, we interviewed Ryan Moore at Uncanny Automator. Really neat plugin, and they just published a blog post on how to connect two WordPress websites together. And I thought this was really interesting because a lot of people are using Groundhog on like subsites or using LMS tools on subsites, and they got their marketing site, and it's kind of like this network of websites that they all want to speak to each other. And Uncanny Automator has this really neat solution where you can essentially just use that plugin to send information back and forth between those sites really effectively. So I linked the blog post to their explanation on how to do that there. And I think
we actually use that for when WP Fusion, people often are saying, hey, I have like 2, 3, 4, 5 sites I want to connect together. And that's fine. You can have an unlimited number of sites. But if you wanted to, let's say, have your primary site be the WordPress website that sells stuff with WooCommerce, and then you wanted those customers from site A to be put into site B when normally that wouldn't happen, this is one of the ways to do it. There's also another product that lets you do it from the CRM level, which is called Pipedrive, that synchronizes one CRM to another. But this is a solution that many people actually don't realize they're going to need, but then they end up wanting it because they're having, you know, let's say multiple websites for one business or something.
Oh, really great. We're going to wrap it up, folks. We'll be back next week with a great panel, some great stories. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.
Bye.
Stop it. And how do I stop this? Here you go.